Warning: World Weary Podcast occasionally discusses mature themes and uses colorful language. Why, hello there, world weary people. I'm the American one, Cassiopeia Walker.
And I'm the British one, Violet Star.
And this is, of course, World Weary Podcast. And today's my day to choose the topic. And so I'm going to start out with a quick warning at the top. While World Weary is all about lifting spirits and delving into the strange and fantastic, sometimes we go into some weird territory that's also dark or tragic. If you have trouble listening to stories involving children whose lives are severely troubled, please skip today's episode and come back for a lighter one. But yeah, onwards to the episode. So, one of my favorite childhood movies, and I don't know if, because Violet hasn't told me her story, I just know it's not the same as mine. So I don't know if yours goes into it, but like, The Jungle Book, of course, captured my imagination as well as loads of people. What would it be like to be raised by animals, is the discussion we're having tonight. Would there be a singing, jazz-crazed bear to help protect me alongside a suspiciously friendly leopard?
Oh, did I tell you about that recent Jungle Book movie that was on Netflix? It's directed by Smeagol. Smeagol stars in it.
Smeagol!
It's like Lord of the Rings meets Snatch.
See, I saw the other one. I knew they were doing two. Yeah. I saw the other one with Christopher Walken as the Ape King, and he sort of sings.
The really fancy one.
Yeah.
That came out a few years ago. Yeah. I watched that on an airplane. I think it was pretty.
It was all right. I liked Christopher Walken's bit. Yeah. It was very weird.
It was weird, and it was very like artistic,
stylized,
and, like very like theatrical and stylized. Kind
I don't remember much other than Christopher Walken bit being very tense and scary. I liked that. So what's the new one?
Okay, so yeah, it really is. It's Lord of the Rings meets Snatch, like Lock, Stock, that kind of vibe. Meets The Jungle Book, meets Andy Serkis, aka Smeagol, running the show. So it's like, is it Baloo the Bear?
Yeah.
Baloo the Bear is like this like Cockney, like he sounds like Ray Winston.
Oh my god.
And he's like this like, he sounds just like, he's not Baloo. I'm just the whole time I'm like, oh, it's this like Cockney taxi driver being like,
where to?
Yeah, they're giving these like
trouble.
They're giving Mowgli and the like baby wolves this like test, like they're preparing them and training them.
Okay.
Giving like Baloo gives them lessons. He's like their teacher, but it's all to me. I'm just hearing him being like predicting him to say something about like the knowledge that London taxi drivers famously have of like, right, Mowgli, if you're on Workwell Street, how do you get to Clerkenwell Street without going on the A1? It was like that kind of thing. Like, it was really like that. Oh, I don't know. And there was like, I swear the snake, I think the snake is Galadriel. Kate Blanchett.
Oh, I think I heard about this.
They do the Lord of the Rings like opening preface thing,
I heard about this.
But with Jungle Book. So it was like, and things that should have remained forgotten were not forgotten. It was like literally like the Lord of the Rings. It was such a weird mashup.
That's awkward.
It's fun to watch though, just because.
This is the thing. These are real life people. All these actors and everybody, they live these grand lives.
Like
at the end of the day, they're like
shit. Do that without like thinking in the moment. I am totally ripping off
Lord of the Rings. I'm here with my Lord of the Rings co-star.
Smeagol. Smeagol has just taken a template for Lord of the Rings and Snatch, and then tried to inject Jungle Book characters into the mix.
It just shows a fucking complete backwards lack of understanding of what people love about the Jungle Book. And it's when it's gone mad. Andy Serkis has let all those little green screen nodes go straight to his head. Like, the paint has gone through his brain and tainted him with just Lord of the Rings nonsense. Filmmaking. All right. So, of course, we all loved the Jungle Book. So, fucking... When I used to watch a Jungle Book, I used to fantasize about, being raised by animals and stuff like that. And so, as soon as I got the internet, around 12 years old, dial up, I was allowed an hour of time because mom might get a phone call. I used to research two things. One, Sailor Moon. SailorMoon.com still exists.
Oh.
To feral children. Don't know why. I was a fucking weirdo. But I was just fascinated and intrigued. But quickly, when you research feral children, the reality sets in pretty quick. And it was clear that I wasn't the first person to wonder. And as it so happens, these cases, these real life cases of wild children, are probably the inspiration for the Jungle Book. So full circle moment. So what is a feral child? I know you know, but if you don't know, basically a feral child is a kid that's lived away from human contact at a young age, and it affects everything. Because when you're deprived of human contact, it disturbs your normal behavioral patterns as a human, as well as your speech and sometimes mental development, everything. We're a social species. We need nurture. And it means they exist outside the normal human structure of family, care, and social environment. But there are so many different cases of feral children. They're all slightly different. And sometimes animals, rather than just kids like wandering off or something, sometimes animals have been known to snatch children purposefully. Sometimes it's happenstance, or perhaps some kind of maternal instinct from an animal like a wolf, or what we would basically anthropomorphize it as pity, but it's actually just like this maternal instinct, most likely. And each case is tragic, but it still remains something I'm fascinated by, especially being an animal lover. So, feral children. When did you first hear about them?
They're like one of those things that were always in the Unsolved Mystery books. You got your Sasquatch, you got Loch Ness Monster, you got a bit of UFO abductions, and then you've always got like these like amazing, extraordinary stories of what was called the feral child, which now I think is like the appropriate word might be isolates or something like that, I think. But for this episode,
we're going for feral.
We have to go with the archaic language a bit here, just to kind of give you the vibe of how people have viewed this.
Yeah,
this
and
concept.
this is a subject that can easily, from what I've seen just researching my story, there's a fine line between, studying and exploiting. And sometimes it feels like people are more exploiting it. But I am merely like fascinated by it, intrigued, and of course Violet being a rookie archaeologist / anthropologist, it's your sort of job to know about these things because, you have to know what people are like. Yeah, I don't know. The responsibility. Okay, so did you love Jungle Book? Obviously, you must have.
Okay, well, I don't know actually. I was not really that impressed with Jungle Book as a kid. I kind of didn't like the idea of Mowgli. So,
see, I just love...
But I was a bit more of a Little Mermaid.
Oh, yeah.
A Little Mermaid child.
I was just obsessed with anything with song and dance.
But yeah, I liked the orangutan. I liked the bear. It was very cute. In fact, we had a Jungle Book school play when I was like...
Oh, wow.
6 years old. So I just moved to the school. And
oh, wow.
Entered year 1. And all the other kids had been in reception age together when you're 4 and 5. So I was like a new kid at the school, and they were putting on this school production. I think it was something really lame, like a hyena baby or something, crawling. I just remember crawling around on the floor, in this brown mini jumpsuit with a mask on.
Oh my gosh, that's cool. We didn't ever do any cool school plays. I did a lot of Christian mini plays and stuff.
I just had this memory from the other day when I saw I think it was on Twitter, someone had shared a meme or something as a picture of a kid in a little school play with 20 little kids together on stage, and there's this one kid in a full green fluffy bodysuit just lying flat on the stage in front of everyone, and it said you think your life's bad, this kid was grass in the school production.
Oh, no.
And then I was like, oh my god, because I remember when one of the first school productions in was Annie, and I was a wall.
No.
They put a sheet over me and made me stand out stretched like a star with a sheet.
What is
on
wrong
me.
with adults?
I'm still bitter about that.
What kind of cruel world do we live? This is why we do this podcast. We have been forced by our environment and trauma to seek out wonderful
maybe that
things.
was the making of me, because, you know, they can suck it, because I was like, I got the best mark in theatre studies and drama.
You take that small role and you make it into something. You elevate that wall. You elevate it.
I went from wall to navigation officer in the school musical.
That's right. That's climbing. Me, I was angel number 3 in the nativity. I was an angel, I think, which I thought was the best role. But it turns out, like, according to certain people, that's supposed to be the worst role, is because you sit there and do nothing. I remember I was like, I think I was 6 or 7 in this community church, because, I mean, my mom was like pagan and stuff. We grew up in a Christian area, and my parents tried out Christianity like a cheap suit. So, and I remember being in this nativity as an angel, and they literally suspended me. I was like 6 or 7, and they put me on like this rope suspension thingy for 3 hours. Anyway,
what was I in the nativity?
You had to have been, oh gosh, wise man number 3.
It's in the name.
You were the star?
I was the star.
You were the
of
North
Bethlehem,
Star?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
In a gold, my mum made this crazy like gold lame like ballerina
Maybe
dress
that's
of gold
is there
sequins,
even an angel in the nativity, is there?
Yeah, my friend was the angel.
Okay.
And that was a
I'm just wondering if I've
itself.
made, like, somehow, like, you know when you feel like there's a weird memory from so long ago, especially as I'm 30 now, like, I feel like I don't know what's real anymore. But I do remember being, like, hung from this weird rope contraption.
Mine was bad. I had this, mum made this giant star on my back. So I was in a gold, like, crazy sequin dress.
Oh, gosh.
Like, crazy curly golden hair. And a giant gold material star made of, like, wire and shit inside.
How did
Sticking out like a freaking 5-pointed star attached to my back with straps like fairy wings. And then I had to walk from the back of the audience up the aisle onto the stage, reading this, like, biblical, like, you know, I was, like, one of the only good speakers in that class. Reading this, like, prose out, but as I just remember, as I was walking along the aisle, it was too small, and my points on my star were just tangling into mother's hair and wigs and stuff as I walked up. It was the most embarrassing.
This is the thing, like,
thank God
for
I'm
me,
so young.
The question is, how in a nativity did you not just burst into flames immediately?
My friend
Violet is so not a golden hair. Like, she's a Tim Burton
I'm a nightmare. Sickly Tim Burton, like, I look like Edward Scissorhands.
I think there's something in the wind.
I really am. But yeah, my friend was the angel, and they had her, like, climb up on a step ladder, or like a mini ladder, behind a giant Christmas tree on the stage.
Oh no.
And this was my good friend Abby.
The angel is the most fucking dangerous part you can play.
And they had her, like, up there in this tiny, she had this, like, little silk, like, negligee or something on.
They
like,
put me in an almost
crazy,
see-through
like,
thing they used for baptisms, and I was so self-conscious, and, like, a rope around my waist, like a little gold thin rope. I was like, wow, like, so this is just basically, like, hanging me from this see-through,
Exactly.
no shorts or anything underneath.
Just bandages. It's the worst. Yeah, walked up, Abigail, my good friend, who would probably love a shout out.
Yeah.
She walked up this ladder, and I remember she, like, fell, or was a chair or something behind this tree, and, like, kind of got up there, and everyone just saw her little hair and little red hair, like, poking out the top, and then it was like a little scream, and the chair collapsed.
No. Oh, it's really dangerous, these nativities. Okay, so back to the subject. Okay,
let's do it.
What animal or animals would you prefer to be raised by if you had to choose?
I talked about this with my mum the other day. We decided that my mum is probably raised by prairie dogs. And
how does that work? She's gonna be under the ground.
Just, like, digging a little hole, like, standing up, looking around, like, running under a bush really fast. I don't know, like, I feel like I should have really researched this more, but I feel like I remember hearing a very heartwarming tale about a guy that, like, wasn't really raised by ostriches. He sort of ended up living alone with a load of ostriches for a long time.
That would scare me. They're dangerous.
Yeah, but I feel like ostriches, they're not chill with anything. Not chill with any other birds. But I feel like people kind of look a bit like ostriches. You know what I mean? I feel like they could recognise you sort of on the same height as them.
Yeah.
Got eyes looking forward, long neck. You could, like, blend in with ostriches quite easily.
Oh, yeah.
So,
give me a bustier.
Yeah.
Like, give me a hoop skirt. I'll look like an ostrich. But yeah, I don't know about myself. If I could choose, I'd probably definitely want to, like, be raised with lions. Because, like, the ladies are doing all the work, like, as far as, like, we get to go out hunting, they get to go out hunting and stuff like that. And it seems, like, pretty cozy. Like, you'd always be warm and they're big cats.
If bears weren't so dangerous, I would like to be raised by bears. I feel good. I have an affinity with bears. If I was a man, I would definitely, like, start growing out a big grey grizzly beard. I'll change my name to, like, the grizzly. There's definitely my spirit animal.
Oh, man. Alright, so I guess I'll start my story. So
let's do it.
Alright, here we go. The story I'm going to tell is about a girl named Oxana Malaya. So, Oxana was born in 1983. She's a perfectly, average healthy baby, and she's from the Ukraine. What I'm about to tell you is everything from Wikipedia that you're going to be able to find. According to Wikipedia, her parents were extreme alcoholics and terribly neglectful. Oxana was just 3 years old when her parents, too drunk to properly care for her, left their young daughter outside. As it was very cold, the 3-year-old Oxana crawled into the farm kennel and spent the night with the local dogs. Alright, so that's what Wikipedia tells us. And this means, of course, that during the most crucial years for language and communication, Oxana was pretty much solely under the care of these dogs until she was 7 years old, apparently. When basically Child Services of Ukraine found her, noticed it, her crawling on all fours and stuff, and took her to the Odessa Institute. And the director, Oxana Malaya, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, this is a quote from her. A lot of the information that I'm going to go into now is from the documentary Wild Child. So this is outside of Wikipedia. I've went into a few different things to try and find out the real facts. Because, again, Wikipedia's let me down. Not all the facts are there. And it's kind of... We'll get into it. So, this is from the director of the Odessa Institute that took her in. She was more like a little dog than a child. First of all, she couldn't speak, or she could hardly speak. And actually, the purpose of speaking, she didn't think it was necessary to speak at all. She used to show her tongue when she saw water, and she used to eat with her tongue, not her hands. She couldn't understand what a mirror is, and when she was showed a mirror, well, she didn't even recognize herself. She didn't even look at it. So after many years of rehabilitation focusing on behavior, education, and language, Oxana is now able to speak fluently, and the following comes from her interview on Wild Child when she is asked exactly what happened. So this is from Oksana's point of view, which is severely lacking in the Wikipedia as well. There's very little from her point of view. Oksana says, "My mom wanted to have a boy. She had a girl instead, and so she just threw me out and put me in the kennels. From then on, I didn't sleep in the house. I was just visiting the house from time to time. But I did sleep in the kennel. It was my little house. I do love my parents, but I'm not so sure they are my parents or not. I can't forgive them for what they did with me, so I think that they are not my parents." So as you can see, she's got a language pattern of, like, possibly someone quite much younger, because at this point she's about 26 or 22, I believe, at this point when she's being interviewed. There's some clear bitterness there. And from her own words, some neglect on her parents' part. So her parents are extremely alcoholic, neglectful, leaving her out. They find her, she's crawling on all floors. But at 30 years old, Oksana appeared on a popular Ukrainian TV show called Говорить Ukraina. You can see by her body language she's uncomfortable from the start. This may be my reading into things. However, she starts off smiling, but then the host begins to ask questions, and you can see he comes in at her like he's known her for years, like these hosts tend to do. But he seems He's almost aggressive in his body language. Like he gets up in her face and is asking her rapid fire questions. You can see this interview on YouTube. There's a few ones that translate it for you. So yeah, she seems to become hesitant. The first question I'm about to read you may be the clue as to why she's apprehensive. So the interviewer goes as follows. Oxana, do you remember your childhood when you had to live in a doghouse? Oxana, are you nervous? Is everything all right? Is it a lie? So 3 rapid fire questions at the start of this interview. The director, Malaya, is next to her. So she's still with her. Oxana responds, I've come up with this myself. What did you come up with? Well, I saw dogs crawl and started crawling myself. The interviewer goes on, was it just a game for you? Why did you do that? Because it was just interesting for you? After the barrage of questions, tears in her eyes, Oxana answers, I was bored and lonely. The presenter presses forward. Oxana, do you remember your childhood? In the interview, Oxana shakes her head, saying, no, I was young. How did you get to the orphanage? Oxana responds, they took us from home when we were young and the dog was following the car, then it died. At this point in the talk show, the director of the Institute, Oxana Malaya, helps fill in the blanks. She was too young to remember back then, but they say that when she was at home, she had a dog friend and some dog was running after her as they were taking her to the orphanage. Oxana continues, they asked me to show how I was crawling, and I did. The interviewer asks, were you always crawling like that? I did it on the sly. I would escape from the day nap, get on all fours, and run in the yard. I enjoyed it. I played with my dogs. How many dogs? She has 1 dog. No, 2. Dana and Rex. I got them as a gift. The nurse gave me one, but it got hit by a car and broke a paw. So this is like, I believe, at the orphanage after she'd already... So I've raised the other one from a puppy. They follow me everywhere. They always follow my orders. Interviewer asks, how did you train them? Or do they understand you easily? And Oxana's like, no, I didn't train them. We looked in each other's eyes and we perfectly understood each other. So Anna, the director, claims that Oxana can speak. She seems to be able to communicate with the dogs. But not only that, Oxana's been, because she can't get a normal job and she can never really leave the institute because she's very vulnerable, essentially. She works with horses, so they've got her a job she can work. And Anna claims that she can also speak with the horses, so horses respond to her. And she just does it by looking in their eyes and this weird communication. That's the director.
Yeah.
So finally, the host asks what Oxana's dream is. Oxana says, I want to find my biological mother. This is my biggest dream. I told my brothers to go search for her. And so the interview sort of ends. They ask her about a boyfriend she had, stupid stuff like that. But I didn't think it was really relevant. So, and the following is from a 60 Minutes Australia episode. Do you know what 60 Minutes is?
Kind of, yeah.
It's like the American Watchdog almost. Like, not quite, but it's usually hot topics. There is an American version of that Watchdog series specifically about like trying to help consumers and stuff and trying to bust people, but this is sort of like a hot topic thing about something. Oxana's mother has disappeared completely, but her father made a 350-kilometer trek to meet Oxana, and he showed up with Nina, her half-sister that she never knew existed. After, you can watch this video online, the clip from 60 Minutes, it's so loaded because she's sitting there, she's standing across from the man that essentially suffered from alcoholism and neglected her because of his suffering. And it's all come back full circle, and she's still probably bitter and has all these baggage with them. And I can't imagine what she's going through as she watches him. They're stood about 10 meters away from each other, and her demeanor is so scarily similar to that of a dog. And this is after years of therapy. It is very fascinating and tragic and sad and upsetting and wonderful to watch this scene, because she's looking at him and he's looking at her. He's got the half-sister sort of back, already beginning to cry. And the father takes one tiny little step. Oxana takes one tiny little step. And the father does the weirdest, I've never seen a man step so slowly forward and without actually making any forward progress. He takes 3 tiny little steps forward, the most hesitant, steps you've ever seen is heartbreaking because you know he's thinking, I fucked this all up. And he doesn't know whether she's going to reject him. And she, after he does those first 3 initial steps, she just sort of hesitantly just walks over and they embrace. And they start talking. He says hello. So he's like, hello. And she's like, hello. And then they start talking. And it's really sweet. And the half-sister's there and she's like crying. But like, nowadays, it's actually one of the happier stories I've researched for feral children because nowadays she's getting the help she needs. She's got a job. She's got lots of family. She says she loves her brothers. She plays with their children and things like that and has lots of fun with kids. And, you know, obviously she's been on interviews. She's able to communicate. And, you know, it just comes down to a very, very upsetting and tragic story of somebody who got lost along the way, but there were these dogs that helped her. And I think it's just so sweet that the dog, like, it's just sad. It ran after her when she was being taken away, you know, because probably, I don't know. I always get worried I'm anthropomorphizing something, but like, I just feel like animals have this, we're all connected and it's just, it's like her mom. Those dogs were her caretakers and her friends.
Where it sounds like she very much learned, you know, or got some comfort from that situation with the dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like...
But it's not like a truly... she was always on the property, it seems. So it's a lot different to some feral stories where the kids, you know, and there's a lot of debate with a lot of stories, whether they're real and stuff. But this one, you know, just comes from this place of awful neglect. And even the fact that she can sit there and forgive her father, because she did. After that initial bitterness from years ago when she was about 22, she's like able to at least embrace him again. Yeah. And it's just incredible.
This is the thing, is like with all of these stories of like isolates or, you know, what was called, you know, feral children or children raised by animals, so many of them, if you scratch the surface, there's like super bad abuse. Like these are all stories of like some level of child neglect, child abuse, just child poverty, like all the worst stuff that can happen to a kid. Yeah. And a story of survival. One of the things actually that kind of is difficult about this, for example, I told you when we were planning for this episode, I was like, I keep thinking I found something that I want to talk about, and then I get deep into it and I'm like, oh my god, this is like the worst. Like, this is so tragic. Like, I don't think I can talk about this.
Yeah, especially when we're trying to like...
really putting a downer on things. Like, just the worst stories of child abuse. And like, so many of them are called like, you know, so-and-so the bird boy or
and it's so
the monkey
sad.
girl.
That's
and
why I focus on her name is Oxana Malaya. She's not just girl raised by dogs.
They're not, that it makes it sound like that freak show attraction that it was in the past. Yeah. When really these are just simply stories of serious
people who were showed more compassion by animals than the humans who are supposed to take care of them, who have the intelligence to know what effect that's going to have on another human. Yeah. That's what's the saddest part about it. But what I want to focus, like the bright shining star of this and why it still fits into the world weary thing is because these animals are fucking sitting there and being like...
These people that have experienced it or survived it have led an extraordinary life. It is something so different, and there's a reason why in the past it was this like almost like freak show kind of... People couldn't believe these stories. They were mysteries to people because it seems so impossible to us. So I think that's what makes them worth exploring, talking about and discussing, because it is such an extraordinary situation for humans to get into, or at least it seems to be for us.
Well, I mean, that's my story. Oxana Malaya, you go girl. I fucking can't believe it. I fucking, what a fucking hero, what a champ, what a compassionate human being. You know? I'm
sure we can link some of the stuff in.
Yeah, everything's going to be on Instagram, on the
social media.
We are going to launch a website, worldwearypodcast.com, most likely.
It's in the works.
It's happening. Get your gnome merc.
One day.
We'll be back in a second with Violet's story.
So my story today is Raised by Monkeys.
Ooh.
So this story is about what was called a feral child, but the appropriate word now is isolates. And this story is about a guy called John. So John lived in a small village near Bombo, Uganda.
Oh, wow.
And at approximately like 2 or 3 years of age, John witnesses his father, a violent alcoholic, murder his mother in front of him. And in fear, the toddler John ran and hid in the forest about 3 kilometers from their home.
Wow. So he just ran 3 kilometers.
He said later on that he feared for his life.
Yeah.
You know, he thought his father was going to attack him. And he's obviously
at
sort of
such a young
traumatized.
age.
Yeah. He runs away into the forest. And so his father at some point after the murder commits suicide.
Oh, wow.
After a few days in the forest, totally alone, John says he remembers some monkeys coming up to him. So these monkeys were like, I think they're like green vervet or grey vervet monkeys.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what these are.
We'll look them up later.
I'm going to be like,
afterwards I'll Google image one for you. And he says that the monkeys offered him food, like nuts and roots and farm crops. So like the monkeys often raid farms for like things like sweet potatoes and stuff. And over time, the monkeys got used to him in the forest. They weren't wary of him. They realised he didn't like pose a threat. And eventually, this troop of monkeys befriends John. And he says that from the monkeys, he learned to travel with them, to find food, and to also climb trees with the monkeys. So he was kind of following this monkey family around in the forest as they travelled, and like observing them and foraging in the forest and raiding the crops with the monkeys. You know, he was kind of copying them, doing the same, and therefore surviving.
Oh, wow.
So there's no proof that the monkeys actually fed or like offered him food. Apparently, like primatologists, so the people that study monkeys basically and apes, would regard this as really unlikely. Like they don't normally do stuff like offer a strange creature food, but they are quite happy to accept that monkeys might steal more food than they need and like drop it on the ground.
And he perceived that.
Saw that and went and picked up that food from the ground and ate it, and then slowly this relationship builds where he
followed them.
He copies, he learns from the monkeys, he witnesses the monkeys foraging for a certain food,
then
he copies that because
he
sees he can get that same food, and the monkeys tolerate it. So of his time in the forest, John says he remembers like not being able to sleep well, like he could never sleep properly. It was difficult to sleep up in a tree, or like he didn't sleep well on the ground. So you guess he's just in this permanent state as a tiny kid that doesn't really know anything. You've got whatever learning you've got up until maybe 2 or 3, because no one's 100% sure how old John is.
Yeah.
You're just in this permanent state of trauma and probably discomfort, just surviving. And it goes down to those like base instincts that humans have. Like we don't necessarily have an instinct to like run at something and bite it and eat it. We've got our instincts are a bit more like learning, observing, mimicking, like that's our method for survival. So it was those instincts helping that tiny little boy to survive, because he was observing and copying
what other
animals were doing to survive. So yeah, sleeping in trees sounds rough. Sleeping on the ground all the time sounds rough. I would not be happy.
No.
That'd be uncomfortable. So
I have nightmares where I'm sleeping in a tree and fall off. And I swear it comes down to spatial memory.
Yeah.
And when we
back to like when we were like tree shrews or something.
Yeah.
Like Sid the Sloth or something. So yeah, so for approximately 2 years, and of course the times and the dates are very, very iffy in this story because no one's really certain John's exact age and the length of his ordeal. They're not sure, you know, exactly how long he was in the forest for. But John survives, living alone in the forest with these monkeys. So at the time, I mean, you'd kind of imagine, like, really, can a kid, like, hide that well from all the other people? But in that time in
after
Uganda,
a day's gonna get dirty. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And, like, someone, like, hunters or people working in the forest or something might come across you. They're going to come across you. You're raiding crops. Farmers going to be about, surely. But the kind of, well, in a way, the unfortunate thing here was that there was, I think, still active civil war, or they were coming to the end of a period of civil war in Uganda. So there was a lot of of population movement around, people not really settling, people sort of coming
and people
going.
not necessarily thinking a small child's going to be
Exactly.
in the woods.
And because no one's settling down there, people are moving a lot. There's very, very small, very isolated rural villages all around these forests. No one's going into the area of forest that he was living in, you know, and the forest is big enough and deep enough that you could get isolated in there. And so it kind of happens that for this period of time, he was literally living in you know, almost total isolation in this forest. No humans were using the forest at that time because people just weren't settling properly. And also at this point, you know, the fields and the farm around the forest were really unguarded because of the Civil War. So the villagers that were in that area at the time said because of this, because no one was really farming these fields properly and people were moving out, the forest became really heavily populated with monkeys.
Oh wow, yeah.
Normally,
so
when people had been settled around in the area, they would clear monkeys because monkeys are considered serious pests to farming and agriculture.
And can't you eat monkey?
That's a question for another day. But they're considered vermin and they do chase them away. They're not like a cute.
Well, if they're stealing crops, they're
people
like
don't take kindly to monkeys, basically. But this was the deal. It was wary. It was just bad times. No one's hanging around in the forest, and the monkeys. There's a huge population of monkeys in there. It seems like some local villagers had stayed on, sort of knew about. They remembered this situation with this alcoholic, violent local guy murdered his wife. Kids run off. They don't know where the kid is. They never found the body of the kid.
Yeah.
So it seems like, if you really think about it, some local people had a bit of an idea. But at this point in time, they are not worried about dealing with looking for some little boy who may or may not be dead. They probably just thought he died. You know, people had bigger issues, even though it's awful to say that.
Yeah.
This was a
very complex
moment and time where people, you know, weren't bothered about dealing with this situation, even if they knew about the rumour that some little boy was there. There's nothing they can do.
Yeah.
So a woman and possibly some other people who lived in these villages near to the forest had occasionally glimpsed John from time to time in the forest or like out on raiding the farmland next to it. So there were some people who had knowledge that there was a wild boy living in the forest, but they said he was too wild, very unresponsive, like aggressive, and also clearly so scared of people that anyone who glimpsed him hadn't been able to.
Can you blame him?
Yeah, they couldn't make contact with him. They didn't want to catch him. It was a bad time for everyone. They couldn't do anything about it. But I think there was some kind of awareness amongst local people that there was this little boy living wild out in the forest. Some people had some knowledge, basically. Yeah. And then one day in 1991, a local woman called Millie from a village sort of close to the forest, she goes out into the forest collecting firewood, and apparently she went a bit further into the forest than usual, and she sees this family of vervet monkeys in the distance. And she notices that there was something weird about one of the monkeys. It didn't have a tail, and when she got a bit closer, she realised it was a human child. So it was John, and he was hiding up in this tree with this pack of vervet monkeys. The details aren't really clear, but we can kind of assume John wasn't responsive to any contact that Millie tried to make, and so Millie goes back to the village, and she returns back to this spot in the forest with a group of local men to see if they can help John and try and get him to the village. So you can probably picture, you know, John's this tiny little boy hiding up in this tree, like probably terrified, you know, suffering severe malnutrition at this point. And, you know, these men are like probably trying to communicate with him, trying to get close to him, maybe trying to climb up the tree to like get him down. And John's adoptive family, this little pack of vervet monkeys, aren't happy about this. No. And apparently they throw sticks and stones at the villagers to defend John. And he manages to resist capture. He actually kind of escapes. And they have to give up. But they presumably, Millie and these other villagers, you know, they're now determined to get him. And it would have been evident to them that he was very thin. You know, he was suffering from like serious malnutrition. So they go back into the forest and they do successfully capture him, and they take him back to the village with them. So we don't know how old John is exactly, and people aren't 100% sure how long he was in the forest for, living on his own. But when he's approximately 5 years old, possibly 5 years old when they capture him. So some of the
maybe
reports,
just a couple years, 2 or 3 years in the forest.
Yeah. So one of the reports says that he was days away from death when they captured him. He was so malnourished, he's like covered in scars and wounds. His knees are heavily scarred from crawling, like they've gone almost completely white from the amount of scar tissue, because he's just crawling around in the forest. He had issues from like his nails growing too long, and apparently he was also covered in body hair when they found him, which apparently is actually common in child isolates, especially if you're living outdoors. Apparently it can result from chronic malnutrition. For example, sometimes people who have a serious eating disorder and lose a lot of weight, that their body also does this. Or, people in poverty, it has something to do with the body, like a last resort to keep the body warm. It sprouts a ton of body hair to try and keep you warm. But anyway, the people in the village, they shave it and it doesn't grow back. Because they sort of bring him back to health. He had like severe case of tapeworms. They removed tapeworms like 1/2 meter long from his body. Oh my gosh,
no wonder.
And, it's agreed that considering his age, he wouldn't have survived much longer in the forest. So by capturing him, the villagers had absolutely saved his life.
Yeah.
So his rescuers in the village, they clean him up, they tried to nurse John back to health. They fed him cooked food, but it actually made him really, really sick, because his body wasn't used to eating that food, let alone like cooked food.
Yeah.
And also he couldn't speak. So of course, he couldn't communicate. He could only cry and like scream, and you can imagine he was like very wary and frightened to this new situation.
And it's so completely foreign. It's like tripping out. Yeah. It's like everything's
like going
different.
To an alien planet.
Yeah.
And he behaved, or he also behaved somewhat like a vervet monkey. So his movements, he couldn't walk properly. He sort of crawled with this like lopsided kind of gait. He would bite. He couldn't make eye contact. He obviously wasn't trained to use like a toilet or like, the kind of behaviours that we learn as little kids. And he was like obsessed with like getting food and eating it, because his whole life had been survival. And also trying to figure out his identity. Some villagers from like John's original village where his parents had lived, where he was born, they kind of identified him. So people, the rumours and the people that sort of had a bit of knowledge that some kid might have escaped into the forest, they identified him and said, this is John. I can't pronounce his surname, but, I'm sure we'll, like, write that down with some sort of links or information. Yeah, so they reveal his backstory, and people put the kind of puzzle pieces together about the events which led him to hide in the forest, that this murder happened and he witnessed it, and he was obviously traumatised and ran away from home. So, of course, after being rescued, John becomes the centre of attention in this village. Because of his appearance, he apparently had this unusual covering of body hair when they found him. And, like, obviously the strange behaviour. People were frightened of him. Some people called him a monster. They said he was an evil spirit. Aww. Local children were mean to him. Apparently there were even some people who thought he should be killed.
Wow.
Because they thought he was some sort of spirit creature. So it wasn't good.
And
even though they were doing their best. Yeah.
You can't imagine, earlier times when this has happened, how strange it could have been.
So Millie and the villagers that rescued John, they get in touch with a Christian orphanage run by Molly and Paul, I think, Wasua, called the Molly and Paul Childcare Foundation, who actually took John into their own house to care for him, because he obviously was going to be too much of a sort of special situation for a regular orphanage. So living in their care, John eventually learns how to speak pretty well, which suggests to language experts that as a toddler, before he went into the forest, he had learned some level of speech and talking. He got
his
the
mom
basics
did a good
down.
job.
Yeah, he was, a lot of little kids, even like 2 and 3 year olds, they're picking up that template of language. So it takes sort of roughly 10 years to kind of assimilate John into a sort of fairly like normal position in human society. He develops a lot, he learns a lot of skills in their care. He apparently is a great football player, and he's been able to lead like a good life into like adolescence and stuff. So because no one can be exactly sure how much time John spent with the monkeys, or really what his relationship with the monkeys was like, you know, because he was so young himself, and it would have been such like a traumatic experience. You know, people say his memories can't be that clear when you're that young. It's very, you know, you don't know what your brain kind of makes up to make sense to you as a little kid, like, or how you interpret a situation. But one important fact to the legitimacy of John's story is that John identified the monkeys as these common African grey or green vervet monkeys when asked about what monkeys he'd been living with. And apparently this is really significant because these are one of the very few species of mammal that live in social groups and will actually accept and tolerate a lone individual of another species of monkey living alongside their group. Because most other monkeys and apes don't do this. Like chimpanzees, they will normally eat like a human child if they came across it. This is, you know, he's actually identifying monkeys that it's accepted would kind of raise a human kid with them or allow them as a peripheral member of their pack. You know, they see a mutual benefit in that. So some documentary makers and scientists actually did a kind of test with John when they interviewed him. I think it was through the BBC. They placed him with a group of vervet monkeys, so the same kind that looked after him in the forest, to observe how he would react and kind of behave. So John's behaviour towards the monkeys, like the way he held himself, he didn't make eye contact, he like holds himself to the side, his sort of communication with the monkeys responded really well and actually demonstrated behaviour towards John that they normally wouldn't do with another.
Because he's speaking their language as far as body language goes.
Yeah, they would normally only do that with another monkey. You know, so he was able to like safely play with the monkeys in a way that untrained people would not be able to. And a primatologist called Dr. Debbie Cox, who was working, I think, at a Uganda Wildlife and Education Centre, said that she was able to observe John's behaviour with these monkeys, and that from her expert standpoint, she pronounced that John was unique in her experience in that he was able to interact and communicate with the monkeys to a degree that she had never seen before in an untrained individual. Yeah,
it's different if you got 20 years in training, but that's like, you know, if you think about it, he was in the forest for a couple years, had to survive.
Yeah.
It lends it a lot of credibility, a lot.
And Dr. Cox estimates that to have learnt the complex body language and sounds that John exhibited with these monkeys.
So he's sounding, like making sounds?
He must have been accepted and tolerated as a peripheral member of a group of these vervet monkeys. She said for a lone individual, this acceptance normally takes several months, at least 2, probably more than 4. So she concluded that John must have spent a period of at least several months with this group of vervet monkeys. So because of this test situation, it's evaluated that John is being on the same level of communication that someone who'd spent like ages training with monkey behaviour. So it's really good evidence, like you said, that he's really got experience of closely living around these primates. Also, although John's like assimilated into regular society, he's now, you know, it's quite hard to find much information. He's obviously got his own private life. I think in some sort of care situation, but he'll be an adult now, a bit older than me, probably a similar age to you. There's still sort of, as a teenager when he was sort of last properly interviewed, there's still residual kind of differences in his behaviour. So in an interview when he was a teenager, you know, he still can't really make eye contact. He talks in monosyllables. When he smiles, he always pulls his gums back, retracts his gums. And although he can like walk and run, he does have a like significant lopsided gait, which is quite like simian in appearance. And he uses his hands quite awkwardly. He had trouble kind of holding objects properly with his hands.
Oh, wow.
Some doctors had suggested that John might have like developmental problems or learning difficulties, but that doesn't seem to be the case because he's proven himself to be very physically able and very smart and like a great listener, and he's got this fantastic singing voice. So he's been part of like a choir and he travelled the world with them. So it doesn't seem that there's anything like seriously wrong on a developmental point of view. But these are all sort of just that early imprinting, like learned behaviour. And John, just to kind of finish off, has some very like thoughtful and sweet things to say in interviews in the past. So an interviewer asked him about when he was first rescued and taken to the village, and you know he got all this bad attention and picked on by the children there. And John's response to that is that he knew that they were just interested. People were interested in him. I don't really think bad of them for that. I was different. And when asked about his time with the monkeys, he says, I'm grateful not because of the love from them, from the monkeys, but because what they did made it possible for me to be loved by other people, by humans, which is very sweet. So that is the story of John. I can't pronounce his surname, but I will.
Let me have a go.
I think it's Ssebunya or Ssebunya or Ssebunya.
Oh gosh, Ssebunya? Your guess is as good as mine. I'm not very good at
We'll
pronouncing.
put it up there so you guys
I already know I butchered those Ukrainian names. So
it's going to be a lot of fun, especially when we do slightly worldwide stories.
I gotta stick to America.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even pronounce some of the British names.
But these we both ended up, I think, because, okay, so originally I was going to do a different episode, but it was bumming me out. So we just last minute changed to this one. And then this one was very difficult in a sense. Because I'd forgotten that it is full of tragedy. The story I was going to do was the most famous case, arguably the most famous case of the two girls.
Oh, right.
And it's just so sad. And there's a lot of wishy-washy information. The ones we chose, it just happened, they, at around the same age, 3 years old, just when they've had enough human imprinting to sort of like me. Because I think the challenge is with isolates is that fact that because we have this comprehension other species don't, it's one thing to learn words, to know that this is a cup or this is a table. It's another thing entirely to piece together sentences in order to, convey a complex idea. And anything can be a complex idea if you don't know the structure of how a language works. If you lose that critical time in life with humans and human interaction, and it's this huge battle between nature versus nurture, what's really, really, what makes us human? Is it our social environment, or is it a combination of things? And the fact that these children, if it's a certain time period, they could come back from it and then communicate these things of how they lived and survived through that is just incredible. Because a lot of the time they can't. Like some of these stories, the children never come back from it. And sometimes they die when they're reintroduced to society through disease, especially ones that happened a while ago. And just imagine the farther back you go, the worse the understanding and compassion of people as far as like you said, even in 91, these people are wondering if he's a spirit. There's that unknown that is scary. And so it just makes people apprehensive.
Yeah, the thing with isolates is that it is like, they almost always become science experiments afterwards.
And that's the problem.
Here's this kid that's not learned any of that nurture stuff that humans seem to need to learn all of the crazy complex rules and
the reason
codes
why
of human behavior, but they still have some of these. We all have these instincts, and they have an ability to survive, an ability to learn and mimic and learn from trial and error and learn from experience and learn from other animals, which is kind of cool. I can see, the interest there. But then there are also stories that are so riddled with the problems of human abuse and
neglect. Well, this is the thing. It's one of the documentaries. One of the scientists literally came out and said it. He said it's the experiment we're not supposed to do, and it only happens naturally, and then we can sort of hop on that if we get a chance. He said it himself, in not so many words. I'm sort of paraphrasing, but I've seen experiments on where they try it. It's a cruel act to take a child from its mother and a safe environment in any case, and deprive it of human contact. You can see, I think they've done experiments like that before, but it's very controversial. And they can't do that nowadays. You cannot do that. So this is the only time it happens is this natural event. And it's very rare, but it teaches us a lot about the consequences of a human being deprived of the natural need for social comfort.
And the other issue that I kind of have with all of this is that people are fascinated still by this idea of feral children. And we have this romantic view of like Tarzan or like
yeah, that's what I was going to mention.
Jungle Book,
Tarzan,
like
where
these children of nature, like running around
and it's
naked
all
with a
wonderful.
special connection to the animals, and we're even just fascinated to see a human that is also an animal, that is one of the animals, because there's so much mythology, at least in like our culture, that tells us that we are separate and that we are special and different, and we're not one of the animals. You know, we're like something advanced or on another level.
Yeah.
But like the way that we imagine feral children is like, it's so it was such a fascination because it's here as a human that is actually one of the children, you know, one of these like children of the planet, and an animal, an equal to like a wolf or a tiger or whatever. Like even recently, I remember some like whimsical artwork project that I think it was like maybe like a Russian, or I can't remember which nationality the artist is. It's like a photo project, kind of like hipstery kind of photo art of feral children, like based on the lives of all these these kids. I think it's called Closer to Nature.
Oh no.
I mean, the woman, I think it's a woman that did it. I can't remember her name. I may be totally wrong. She, you know, did like sympathize with it, and she was so like shocked by these stories that she like inspired her to do this artwork that like brings some awareness to the lives of these feral children. But I don't know, I kind of feel like the photography to me, this artwork, still kind of sums up this like popularized view of the feral child, of these wild children. It's all like,
it's more glamour than it is the sad reality.
It's this stuff of like, you know, a naked girl with like wild hair and muddy knees like crawling up a tree branch, like these awful stories like a boy that's isolated in a flat with lots of birds. His mum is like, I'll link this somewhere, but it's an awful story that actually came out recently in the news from Russia. It was basically just a serious case of child abuse, complete neglect, a parent with serious mental health issues. This boy had just grown up mimicking bird noises and whatnot, and had been seriously neglected. But in this like artwork, it's sort of very whimsical hipster kind of boy with like bird cages and whatnot, and
as if it was an experience that they would have chosen necessarily. It would, like, you know what I mean? As if it was like
people try to Disneyfy it still.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's very difficult.
That's why I started at the beginning.
I don't
These
want to
are
criticize
tragic
people's art
of
or whatever,
course.
and I get where she's coming from, but it's still, we've really got imprinted in us this romantic Jungle Book idea of what it is to be raised by animals, or have a special
this
connection
fine
with
line
animals.
of exploitation versus education. And there's a fine line between, you know, respect and, you know, turning into turning them into like a freak show or something.
If you really try to imagine yourself, put yourself in the shoes of these people that have lived these experiences,
terrifying.
It isn't Disney. There's nothing Disney about it.
There is no singing bear.
No.
You know, that's going to dress in a skirt and do drag to try and save your life and try and seduce an ape king.
Yeah.
You know? It's not the case, and it is something that fascinates me, so I had to talk about it.
Oh yeah, it's a very, very worthy topic, and we need to discuss it because there's so many issues around it, and these are extraordinary lives that people have lived.
Yeah.
So they're very much worthy of mulling over. And there's so
with as much respect as possible.
Yeah. You know,
because the fact to come back from all that and to also be able to communicate, and it's just amazing.
There are a lot of like points that I would like, you know, that you want to express about this topic, but you don't feel necessarily qualified or educated enough to say that I fully understand the idea. I don't know enough about the like psychology of it, or what the capabilities of animals to raise other creatures, or raise an isolated situation with no kind of human guidance if it's a human child. But I think the first thing that's so fascinating, if we try and kind of give a verdict on all of this, is that these children are like sometimes seen as the proof that other species of animals are capable of raising human children. I mean, we know that children can be abandoned and survive on their own in the wild, but, you know, we love feral child stories because it's that these kids have lived amongst the animals, they've learned special behaviours that no one else can learn. They learn their survival techniques from the animals, and they've been accepted by the animals in some way. So it sometimes comes down to this kind of question that is in my head all the time of like, do animals of a completely different species actually want to share their resources and even like protect someone who isn't one of their own? You know, obviously in John's story, experts agreed that the monkeys are capable of like tolerating a peripheral member of like another monkey. They'll adopt other species of monkey. And we know there's lots of examples of other species of animals,
like Oxana, for example,
even
with the
chimps,
dogs,
like gorillas, dogs, whales have like kind of adopted other species or had allowed a peripheral member to their group. And people argue that this is for mutual benefit, that the animals recognise as a mutual benefit to having another species or another member, just another pair of eyes, basically. And I reckon there's even evidence that, you know, they say there's some animals that are capable of doing it out of kind of altruism and like care, and because they get a good feeling, and then maybe an instinct, like you said, to be maternal or to love and protect other creatures.
Yeah, because we had a dog that when we got a kitten in, she mothered him even though she couldn't. She was long since fixed, but she mothered him, and he was the only animal in the whole house that could eat before her and out of her food bowl, even though he shouldn't be eating dog food. So she would carry him. She would clean him like she was a dog, and she's trying to clean him like he was cleaning a cat because we had a bunch of other cats. She knew what they did. It was weird. And so it's very easy for us to anthropomorphize these animals and like attribute these human characteristics to them and be like, oh, they love them. They're like, oh, she's being a mother to them. So it's just I don't know. I'm not an expert.
We're unqualified.
Yeah, definitely. We're just gassing.
But it's like, I do remain really skeptical when I hear someone was like raised by leopards or like a cat or something, because we know those animals are like really solitary. They don't even really like their own kids.
House cats will wait approximately 3 days at most if their owner's dead before they start eating their soft bits. At most. There's a rare case where someone said that the cat didn't eat it at all, and it had been 2 weeks, and the cat was starving itself rather than eat its owner. It was the exception to the rule. Cats don't care. So it's just like, if they were any bigger, they'd kill us. We can't domesticate big cats.
I'm very skeptical about being raised by a leopard.
Yeah.
I think it's very possible, though, that, you know, children surviving alone in the wild can be accepted by, like, certain animal species that have got used to them being around, they've tolerated them. They're cool, maybe even sharing this living space or some resources with this new member of the pack. And, you know, these kids can learn these survival techniques by observing and learning from experience. I think we're just also kind of attracted to, like, hanging out with other animals if you're totally alone. Because we are, like, a social being.
Yeah.
You feel better if you can gain the trust of some stray dogs out there. It's just some company.
Yeah.
You know?
And human history is so tied with animals.
Yeah, we don't want to be alone, like, well, most of us.
Well, most of us.
Yeah. The other, like, important point is that I think loads of these cases in the past, and when it seemed that, you know, it was a lot more possible for there to be wild children roaming about on their own with animals, is also this idea that a lot of the time people were mistaking or misinterpreting children with learning difficulties. Your children just wired differently or had some sort of developmental problems. They might exhibit behaviour and reactions that people would interpret as being animal, like growling or crawling, biting, not being able to speak, maybe like appearing to be like violent or like aggressively behaved. Especially in the past, I think there's definitely some cases where people misinterpreted a child that has been abandoned, possibly, or is like surviving on their own, displayed these kind of behaviours that we now know are just from like learning difficulties and developmental issues. But then I feel like there must also have been cases of people truly being raised by animals. I mean, we have so much like mythology about it with like the birth of Rome and stuff like that.
And it goes back to the Bible as well, Romulus and Remus.
It's a really like ancient idea.
And it makes sense that, the farther back you go,
being raised by animals,
even though there's no necessarily recorded history, it would have happened.
Yeah.
And possibly, like you said, more frequently, especially as and when humans were living amongst a lot of animals. How easy it would have been to maybe have like an abandoned child somewhere.
Exactly. So it's like when I was talking to my mum about this topic, she was like, well, maybe things were actually quite different in the past. Like, animals might not have been actually so scared of people.
Yeah.
You know, there were less of us for a start in the past, more animals, more wild, more nature for these kind of things that happened. More, in a way, more situations where people were abandoning children.
Yeah, probably.
You know, and she said it isn't that far-fetched, really, for a wolf to bring, like, a human baby back to the den, and then for the cubs to, like, toy around with, like they do with when they're learning to, like, eat prey. But, you know, that baby, like, drops in the den, rolls around with the wolves enough in the, like,
they're having
poo
fun
with the, like, other, figures out how to suckle. Maybe just you pick up the smell of a dirty little wolf cub,
and then the mom's
and
like,
then
cool.
they forget to eat you, and you just end up like being the cuckoo in the nest. So I think maybe that's possible. Like, I really don't know enough about the wild in the past. As to, like, did animals...
It is interesting to think, though, that...
Have animals really been that scared of us? Like, is this just an invention of guns?
Recent, yeah.
I mean, sure, we've all been hunting.
For years, yeah.
And I don't imagine things like deers were, like, literally eating out of everyone's hand and blue tits coming down and picking, like, seed from my hand, like, 500 years ago. They were still wary, but who knows, maybe things were more chill between us and the animals in the past. But yeah, that was my little venture into Uganda and vervet monkeys and
I never heard that
amazing
one.
little boy that I hope is living a fulfilled
Hope you're doing all right, John. I hope you're
as
doing
an adult.
I'm sure they are. Like, this is the thing, these people are just incredible. If you can survive that kind of stuff, like, it's just amazing.
And what's super amazing is trying to imagine, which I did as a kid when I read these stories in the Unsolved Mysteries books, is really trying to imagine what it was like, what it must be like to be, like, totally isolated from the other humans as a kid.
Hungry all the time.
You know, especially if you're a child, like, where you may not necessarily have learned the things we take for granted, like speech and where to get food from and technologies and how to hold stuff properly and use it, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, all of that,
the
training
simplest things you
babies
take
to, like,
for granted.
spoon feed themselves, that takes time. I've helped babies learn how to use a spoon. It's not an easy process. You know, you have to learn, these kids have to learn it all from trial and error and observation, and you're just freaking scared all the time, probably, and just in that survival mode where you never really take a rest. So that's what's super amazing, to try and, like,
put yourself
imagine, you know.
Whew. So yeah, those were our stories. You know, we've got
lots more planned.
Yeah, we've got loads of stuff planned. I am going to do the episode that I clunked out of last week. I'm not sure if I should mention what it was. Just
we'll get around to it one day.
One day.
We've got so many ideas. So
yeah.
It's just like, we're just getting very excited picking stuff, and then we're realising the amount of stuff we can revisit.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many topics that we'll come back to time and time again. We're just getting the kind of the order of things. We're figuring it out as we go at the moment.
So is there so I'm trying to think of if there's anything, like, cool down wise we can chat about before we head off today. Like,
we had crazy, like, sun this week. And
yeah, we've actually had a little bit of sun.
We've had this, like, freak warm spell. It's gone back to rubbish grey weather again, like miserable rain, but
my cat
like
Boo
the hottest February hottest February days on record. And as, like I said last weekend, how I must have had, like, I feel like I've had seasonally affected disorder this winter.
Same, yeah. No, I feel like, yeah, if you don't know what the SADS is, I never experienced it till I came to England.
I should be used to it. I come from, like, probably, like, thousands of years of bleak British weather. And, like, being stood on a hilltop being rained on.
It is no joke. It actually gets really hard. It was really hard to get through this winter. We've had a few personal tragedies, but I feel refreshed.
Well, it's like, this was the crazy thing. When the sun and the heat came out, it was like I came out of this fog of depression, and suddenly every day wasn't the end of the world, you know, because this winter, as you said, it's been rough, it's been really bleak. Like, although I can see that things are, like, gradually improving.
It's with a hesitation.
Yeah, I know there's still a long way to go before I feel like I've bounced back. And I kind of hope this is going to be one of those, like, phases in my life that I will, like, remember and, like, hopefully look back on and be like,
Oh, yeah.
Shit, that was a really bad
That was
time.
really a rough
and
day.
I'm so glad that I didn't give up.
Yeah.
And I crawled myself out of that hole.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was like, I get real low, and I was like not touching any alcohol because I knew if I did anything out of my ordinary, I was going to go down a bad road, essentially. So I was being very like trying to, and after a while, when you're trying to be so on it, I'm trying to support my husband through some tragedies. I'm trying to stay brave and strong. I'm trying to like, you know, do my normal routine when everything feels pointless. That's when you get that feeling where you just feel like you don't even want to get out of bed in the morning. I didn't want to brush my hair. Like I was just living by automation.
Yeah.
And then right when the sun came out, but I just like, I feel like we're getting out of this cycle, and the podcast is helping a lot as well because it's giving me another thing to focus creative energy on.
Just brightens our day.
It really does. Like,
I mean, get yourself some sun. If you have that like 2 minutes where a little bit of sun ray comes through the clouds,
jump
just
out
like
there.
if you don't have, if it's just bleak, black, like rain.
Look for
just
some
put
fairies.
a lamp, turn a lamp on, shine it in your face. Play some relaxing, cute music. Look at some pictures of like beaches and flowers and stuff.
I had a McDonald's meal that sorted me out. I'm not plugging them right now. Give me free McDonald's. No, but like seriously, I just like the sun came out. I got like cheeseburger to help because sometimes I really miss America, and the only thing that I can do really in this country to really feel, and I know it's so sad sounding, but I go and get a McDonald's. Because it just immediately brings me...
It's the taste of hope.
It's so sad and pathetic.
Mama's home cooking cheeseburger.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
I feel a lot better now. So I hope everyone's coming out of winter.
You need this stuff to... Because this is the thing, is like earlier this week, you put out that tweet that about life in your workplace. It bumming me out. I hate being an office person. It's slowly draining my soul. You really are. I said to you, were complaining about British small talk about the weather, or at least a colleague who can only cope with small talk.
Yeah, they don't get any deeper than the kitchen sink.
And I was really like, wow, you're really becoming a jaded expat. Like, I need some more
I need
McDonald's.
a vacation. But I am sorting out my passport. I got an appointment with the embassy to renew it and everything. It's been about 10 years, so it's just about time. And I think we're going to take a trip at some point somewhere cool. I think you and I should do an actual field trip. First off, Morgan was suggesting like a future episode on like black wolves or black dogs. And we are not too far away from the famous Black Dog Woods.
Yeah.
I think we should do and record a little bit of Black Dog Woods adventure for a future podcast as like an extra special episode only on the website, maybe?
Yeah, we'll do a special episode at some point where we get out and about.
Yeah.
Because I know lots of Black Dog
Oh, it's going to be
pubs, there's loads of Black Talbot.
We'll do the whole
stuff.
thing. We'll do like a whole tour and share it with you guys. That would be great.
But yeah, we've had a lot of good opinions this week and a lot of time to think. Your poor colleagues.
My poor colleagues. I'm a nightmare. I must be a nightmare at work because when you're not happy, like in a situation, it just bleeds. They're all afraid of me.
This is the thing. I'm like, like they are just frightened of you because it's like that like thing when British people just can only handle talking in small talk or like commenting on the weather.
And I'm not having any of it.
It's because we all are programmed with this like insane like social inhibition.
And I love British people. It's just like
that small talk is like it's like a way of testing the water to see if we can have a conversation with you. Like
the answer is no.
We want to check in with you or like acknowledge your existence and that you are kind of worthy of being acknowledged, but without like trapping you in a deep conversation because we also don't like that. We are too polite to like go in for the deep normally. And it's like, I don't know, you remind me a bit of Oscar Wilde because he like famously said something like small talk is for like about the weather or whatever, is like unimaginative or the lowest form of conversation.
Unfortunately, I was born an artist. I know that sounds pretentious, but unfortunately, I was born this person that my brain works completely differently. And when you are slightly maybe on spectrum or different, people will expect you to make the change. Like, we expect everyone to change for the normality, for the sake of normal. And I'm one of those people that I wasn't given the shame bone or the give a fuck bone. So I will literally, it's taken me 30 years to get to the point where I know who I am. And I'm not going to change on the count of a person telling me for the 5th time today that the weather is fine.
You can take the girl out of America, but you can't take America out of the girl.
Yeah, I don't know. I need to work on my attitude at work, but it comes from a place of not liking what I'm doing, and I'm honest about it. I tell people, like, oh, I don't like small talk. I just clock in, clock out, but that's not what people want. And I understand that. I can empathize, but they can never empathize with my situation where when they get comfortable and feel good doing small talk, it makes my skin crawl. It makes me angry. It makes me uncomfortable. Like, I'm too on that spectrum to people like you understand me. Like, we get along, but like, I don't know. It is my problem.
I will, never change. Be you. Be true to yourself.
I just have to be nicer to people. I have to give them.
I definitely encourage you to be the total diva in my life, or like be the Oscar Wilde character, and just fucking ignore people who don't seem to be coming up with anything worthwhile to say to you. Because there are definitely like a ton of people out there.
I have high expectations.
Don't have the capacity, to like think of anything beyond. So at least you're avoiding wasting your time.
I am honest. I know about myself that I'm a cunt.
Because the thing is, like, I'll do British small talk all the time.
Yeah, you're great at it. You can talk to anyone.
Yeah, and like, I think Oscar Wilde's wrong in that no one could categorize me as being unimaginative. It's like, I'm like,
of course,
I'm like the extreme opposite, where people probably think I'm actually a bit mad, and they like stay away from me because I'm too eccentric. But it's like, if I don't know someone very well, or they're a stranger, using my British small talk about, oh, it's like a bit hot today, isn't it? Oh, shame about that rain. Using that small talk about the weather is like my test to figure out, because I can't be rude and ignore someone. I have to, you all get acknowledged in Britain. So there's like a test to figure out who you are, what's your accent like, because then I can immediately tell what demographic you're from. Are you...
Violet's trying to box you in anthropologist style so she can know how to communicate with you.
Are you interested in talking to me? What's the power balance here?
Are you avoiding eye contact, looking for nuts?
I can figure out if you're a bit weird and creepy by just giving a small talk of like, oh, rain today, all that, right? Yeah, it's a bit sunny. It's like,
do you want to look at my collection of dolls without their heads?
Yeah, the way that you respond to me, or the way that or who starts the conversation, who's brave enough to be the one to initiate small talk, I can learn everything about you and decide whether we then
have a future of...
I then like, all right, we'll see you around, or you have to come over sometime, and then I walk very fast away. It's like, I find it really frightening when someone I don't know comes in with like intense, deep conversation. It's like, you haven't jumped over all of the hurdles of small talk yet.
I believe
you haven't taken the test to qualify for that level of intimacy. You're unregulated. And my favourite example of this is when I was living in Japan, I went to the embassy to renew my work visa, and of course this American dude sits down next to me in the waiting room and came straight out with like, he like must have looked at my passport or something, and he's like, oh, I see you're in the British passport queue. Like, I've been to Manchester before. What's your opinion on the political situation in the UK right now? And I was like, I had like one of those like flustered Hugh Grant moments. I was like, I don't know how to deal with the situation. This person's breaking the rules.
The British code.
This is like, the Japanese get the small talk thing. Like 99% of my conversations.
I promise I get it. Because when I first met you, I was making awkward jokes. Remember when you helped me move into that flat? Like move some furniture? The first time we met, I go 2 modes, either super shy or super extrovert. And I had to go extrovert because you were playing the super shy role. You were not talking to me.
Well, I was like you know, I was like, who is this? Is this competition for me? Like,
yeah, because when you
my
met
boyfriend
your
at the time was like,
he was
oh,
talking about...
I'm hanging out with like Cassie and Morgan. I was like, who are these people? Like, are they men? Are they women? And then I get like, no one was good at introductions at that point in time.
No.
Everyone was like a teenager. No one was like, this is Violet.
I was like
Cassie,
barely
Cassie's
20.
I was
just
like,
married.
who this bitch?
Yeah.
Is she, where's she coming at? What's her deal? Why she wanna come with me to like dump this sofa off at the skip or something?
And I was like going into my mode of, I'm going to make joke. I remember just being like, jokes, and I wasn't getting anything from Violet. I got like an awkward chuckle at some point, but I was like...
It was like shooting the chicken coop. You were just like throwing the joke, like shooting the joke at me, just ricochet.
And it wasn't until much later that we became friends, because I was hanging around this girl that you didn't quite get along with, that you guys were all wary of, and turned out to be a person that was sort of not really a good friend for me, a toxic person. So once I was away from that toxic person, then all of a sudden, like, we started talking, and we realized how similar we were. And you knew me by then, but like, yeah, it was pretty funny when I first met Violet. You would never think that we'd be here now.
Oh yeah, I mean, for me, the hilarious thing about observing you as an American in this part of England is like just watching you getting stuck in these situations that irritate you. Because I'm sure the British are really frustrating. And I'm like here like giggling to myself because I've realised you've trapped yourself in level 1 in the game of British small talk.
Yeah.
Because like all the Brits are gonna follow the rules. They're gonna come at you with their basic small talk, level 1 of like, oh, it's lovely and sunny today, isn't it?
And this is what I said
and
to the person.
And they're met with silence.
So this is what
they're met with contempt. They're gonna just give up and wait until they pluck up enough courage again to come at you with another remark on the weather, which you're gonna turn down, and the cycle will continue forever and ever and ever.
This is a conversation between me and my colleague the other day. Yesterday, in fact. Ooh, Friday today. And I went, you are correct. And then kept working. This is my level of autism. Honestly, my brain works differently, and I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm just a cunt. And... but like, if it's British small talk in a situation where I'm comfortable, but the problem is it's exacerbated by the fact that I'm in an environment that I'm already not suited for, and then being forced to have social interaction, the way I socially interact has been changed, and I get bitter by the fact that certain words I'll say, no matter what happens, people will try to correct me. It's that expat feeling. You're there, it's your new home. This is my home, I love this country. But you're never going to be accepted as one of them. And you're never going to truly be, it's never going to be truly your home because you're an outsider.
There's always going to be a frustration if you're an outsider. Yeah. Always a frustration. So maybe you have
cultural differences.
Maybe there's an ancient prophecy, sacred prophecy that you will come and change. And release us from this curse of British small talk rules. And I fully encourage you to be, because we need those people.
Violet's evil with encouraging me about things.
We need an Oscar Wilde, like, I need a diva person who's just like, you are not worthy, I will not suffer, no fool, like, I'm not playing by your stupid British small talk.
I just am unapologetically myself, and...
You're being true to you.
I'm keeping it 100.
You bring that Americanness, we need a bit of...
Something needs to, some shaking up. This is why we're great, because this is like the ultimate combo of British Americanness.
And how many people really get in this deep to analyse the differences between Brits and Americans? Like, not many people get on this level of strange.
But yeah, like, I guess to wrap it up, like, it's been a journey, and I'm hoping, like, by the time the podcast release, I think we're going to think about releasing on an auspicious day. And that might represent the birth of something. Like, I'm looking forward to more positive times ahead. I'm trying to sort my attitude out because I have less stress at work now with someone working next to me. My workload for the first time in years is finally at what it should be rather than me being overworked, to be honest. I feel really good about that. So hopefully we're coming into a time...
We're crawling out of the hole, crawling out the bottom of the barrel, and... Yeah, it's going to be sunny. I'm going to have a great summer.
We're going to have barbecues.
I've run out of Heavy Rescue 401.
I'm watching True Detective.
So I'm going back to, what was it, Highway Through Hell. I love it. I wish that I was like born the daughter of like an insane trucker or like some guy with a rotator, and I could make some trucker persona for myself and drive around Canada towing lorries out of like
there's still time.
ravines.
There's still time.
My mum would love it too. If anyone out there knows, like grizzly single old Canadian trucker who has a rotator or some kind of tow truck.
If you move to Canada, I'll go.
Mum's interested.
We're thinking about it.
Yeah, I just like the fantasy of being. I always go back to this. I don't know what it is about my personality, but I am obsessed with being. One day being an old man, a retired military specialist, growing out a big grey beard, not bathing, wearing like a dirty baseball cap and like dirty fingernails, living out in a hut with my Alsatian in the wilderness. And that I might have been like a recovery tow truck driver.
Wow, for years.
Yeah, for years after I left the military.
Part-time crabber or something. Yeah. Part-time Alaskan crabber.
Creepy, dodgy, weird old man.
Yeah.
It must have been a past life.
Yeah, for sure. I think if I had a past life, I'm pretty sure I was just like a street urchin.
I can see that. I can totally see that.
I'm pretty sure I was like a street urchin, not a good one that sold like, toe cheese or something, like, like just somebody that wandered around the streets dirty and didn't end up doing anything. And I feel like I'm fighting that throughout my life of wanting to just spend my whole life on the streets.
When I think about past life, I always go straight back to I was some weird old man, or like a pervy old man, or a weird elderly man in a past life, because I've been attracted to this, like, the wisdom and the idea, the image of the like mad old hermit since I was a little kid. Like at primary school, like other kids be like playing families and everyone's fighting to be mummy or the baby or the little girl or like pet cat or something. I was like, nuh-uh, I want to be granddad, I want to be the weird uncle. I was like, I remember I was so proud of myself. It was like where I learned to be a bit of a class clown was I was the first kid in my year to realise the joke of like old people can be crazy and can be a funny character, like random old people. And I literally, kids would be like, let's play mummies and daddies, and like all the kids were fighting to be the baby or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was there, me and my friend would be like the mad old granny and the mad old granddad, or like the weird, like creepy old uncle in the wheelchair. And I would make these kids like wet themselves with laughter because no one had like comprehended that that could be like a funny character type. And ever since then, it's like when we played Daughters of Lord of the Rings, was a really popular game when I was like 10 or 11. I was always Gandalf's daughter. Everyone else wanted to be like Legolas's daughter or Aragorn's daughter. Even there was a Frodo daughter at one point. I was Gandalf's daughter or like Saruman's daughter. Like I wanted to like be affiliated with these like wise grey old men.
Because we used to play Old Man Get Those Kids, where we would take.
I love this story.
So basically, what we would do is there's three of us: my older brother, my younger sister, and I. And we used to play games where we like trapped each other in closets, like tying each other to chairs and putting stuffed animals and all the bedding in there, and to see if you could get out. You had like a certain amount of time to escape. My sister almost didn't escape one time, which is why we stopped playing that. But there's Old Man Get Those Kids. You basically blindfold somebody. You usually made my little sister go first because she was the baby. You blindfold them.
Yeah.
And all they have to do is pretend to be an old man and get from one part of the trailer to the other trailer. And while my parents weren't away, and the challenge is you're blindfolded, right? You think that'd be enough. It's a Bird Box challenge before Bird Box, right? Yeah. Except my brother and I are armed with pillows, and not good pillow, like the pillow where it's clunked at the end, so it's hard as nails. So we're just beating the shit out of the old man because he's like a perv or something. He's like, oh, I'll get you, kids. And all the old man has to do is get to the other side. But we basically use it as a chance to beat the shit out of each other as we try to get to the other side of the trailer.
It must be like a really good, like, because we played.
It's a fun game.
We all played similar games. Like, I remember playing these,
it's survival games.
Yeah, we used to play games where we would tie another kid down to a chair in a dark room, say freaky stuff about how we were like in in a satanic cult or something. We were really little as well.
Oh,
we already knew
Where
about
are we
all of
picking
that.
up from?
Probably our parents or like.
I think it comes down to
something.
like kids play the games you're gonna need.
Yeah, it's like so we were all. I was literally gonna say we were like training for like
In case we got kidnapped.
if we got kidnapped by a paedophile. We knew old men could be weird and creepy and should be kind of feared. That butler in Tomb Raider 3 in the house, I was terrified of because it was a smelly, creepy old man that like followed around like going ugh. And like I was full on terror. I had a whole period where I was like terrified of old men and the lore of like creepy old men and like creepy,
especially when we were raised when
skin characters.
Stranger danger comes in.
Yeah.
And every old man is a possible pervert. Like,
so
we grew up in this time period
to play these games where we played survival.
You're role
from
playing.
Creepy old
I'm
men
the creepy perv.
Or being kidnapped or whatever. Like that wasn't because we were like weird and demented. That's the magic of the human brain of children figuring out survival, like practicing survival, practicing playing
without being
fighting.
prompted.
Yeah, we just know this is a danger, and we're going to make a game out of it of how to practice getting out of that danger. And that really is human play fighting.
Yeah. I agree. No, I'm there. Like
prepping for the worst scenario from like the age of 5. Like,
there's so many more creepy games that I can't like, but those are the ones that stick out in my mind that I will remember forever. Because I kind of like would want to play that game again if I didn't have the adult mindset of that's really dangerous.
Yeah.
How many things are we gonna break across the house if I try to do that? Who's gonna fall over and break their knee? But as kids, you're just like, fuck it. But yeah, thanks guys for listening.
Yeah.
Like, we really appreciate it.
We always have a blast, and we're gonna share kind of some sources and pictures and stuff.
Yes, all our sources and everything can be found.
It will be on our social media, which we haven't finalised, but there's Instagram, there's a Twitter.
Yeah, we've got Instagram, Twitter,
maybe a website.
World Weary Pod, and then our email. If you want to email us any stories you have.
Yeah, maybe you were an isolate or
were you raised by ferrets?
Were you raised by guinea pigs? Were you raised by frogs?
I would love if someone emailed in with their own personal story, but like no pressure. But otherwise, if you've got any stories that might, take us away from the weirdness of the world, like
maybe you are a vervet monkey and your opinion is actually hell no, you would never take it, human child, because what have they done for you?
Other than steal your dropped nuts. Any more stuff to plug? I think that's about it. We are going to come out with the website and everything. So make sure you email us if you've got anything you want to tell us, any comments, suggestions, ideas. And we'll catch you next time. Which Violet's in charge next time, so who knows what it's going to be about.
Goodbye.